Welcome to Moonlit Inc. BL. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Empty Chairs. The velvet curtains of the Sycamore estate were drawn tight, but Melvin could still feel the suffocating weight of the expectations pressing against the glass. In his bedroom, a tailored charcoal suit, a gift from his father, lay on the bed like a shroud. Melvin adjusted his watch, his thumb brushing over the faint, jagged scar on his wrist from a training exercise in the mountains. His family saw a wayward son who needed to be reined in. They saw a 28-year-old who was wasting his potential by not sitting in a boardroom. They didn't see the man who had spent 4 years navigating terrain far more dangerous than a gala. 36, Melvin thought, staring at the invitation on his dresser. Misha Ivanov. 36 years old and probably carries a body count higher than my heart rate. Master Melvin. Your father is asking why you aren't downstairs, the butler's voice muffled through the door. Tell him I'm perfecting the knot in my tie, Melvin lied, his voice flat. The moment the footsteps receded, Melvin moved. He didn't reach for the charcoal suit. Instead, he pulled on a faded leather jacket and boots. He wasn't going to be a bartered bride. If the Ivanovs wanted a foothold in the city, they could find it without stepping on his neck. He slipped out the window, scaling the trellis with a fluid, practiced ease that would have horrified his mother. 5 miles away, in the back of a blacked-out SUV, Misha Ivanov stared at the glowing screen of his phone. His Bratva advisors were droning on about strategic alliances and the Sycamore lineage. To Misha, it sounded like a slow death. He is 28, Misha, his lieutenant, Yuri, remarked from the front seat. Young, pliable. The Sycamore family says he is delicate. A bit of a dreamer. He will stay out of your way while we use their ports. Misha's jaw tightened. I don't want a delicate husband, Yuri. I want a partner who knows when to shut up and when to aim a gun. I don't have time to babysit a socialite who cries when he breaks a nail. Misha looked at the sprawling estate they were approaching. The lights were blinding, the air thick with the smell of old money and desperation. He felt a wave of profound irritation. He was 36, he had built an empire out of blood and cold iron. The idea of sitting across from a boy 8 years his junior, pretending to enjoy appetizers while discussing a forced union, felt like a joke. Turn the car around, Misha commanded. Yuri blinked. Boss? The Sycamores are waiting. The patriarch is. The patriarch can wait until his hair turns gray, Misha growled. I have a shipment coming in at the docks that needs my personal eyes. If Melvin Sycamore is as fragile as they say, he'll be relieved I didn't show up to intimidate him. The Emerald Lounge was a dive bar that smelled of stale hops and cheap tobacco, exactly where Melvin felt at home. He sat at the far end of the scarred wooden bar, swirling a glass of neat bourbon. I wonder if he's there now, Melvin mused, a smirk playing on his lips. I bet Misha is standing in that ballroom, looking at his watch, wondering where his fragile little prize went. Melvin felt a twinge of guilt, but it was quickly swallowed by a fierce sense of autonomy. He had served his country, seen things that kept him awake at night, and earned the right to choose his own life. The Sycamore name was a cage, and this marriage was the lock. Another? The bartender asked. Make it a double, Melvin said, checking his phone. His father had left 16 missed calls. I'm celebrating a ghosting. Back at the Sycamore estate, the atmosphere was frozen. The elder Sycamore stood at the top of the grand staircase, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. Across from him, the Ivanov representatives looked equally livid. The 2 chairs at the head of the banquet table remained empty, facing each other like 2 silent monuments to a failed deal. Misha was currently standing on a rain-slicked pier, checking the serial numbers on a crate of Kalashnikovs, feeling a strange sense of victory. Melvin was 3 drinks deep in a dim bar, listening to a jukebox play a blues song, feeling free for the first time in months. Neither of them knew that fate was a far more stubborn matchmaker than their parents. Neither of them knew that in 48 hours, the delicate boy and the monster would meet in a hail of glass and gunfire, and that the empty chairs tonight were just the beginning of a very dangerous dance. Chapter 2, Retail and Red Dots. The morning air in the city was crisp, biting at Melvin's cheeks as he walked toward the Grand Plaza Mall. After the great no-show of the previous night, his father had been a hurricane of rage. To escape the shouting and the inevitable lectures on family duty, Melvin had done the one thing his family expected of a spoiled Sycamore: he went on a shopping spree. But Melvin wasn't looking at silk ties. He was in a high-end tactical gear boutique disguised as an outdoorsy luxury shop, eyeing a pair of reinforced gloves. If I'm going to be married off to a mobster eventually, Melvin thought, his fingers tracing the carbon fiber knuckles of the gloves, I might as well have the gear to defend myself when the delicate act falls apart. A floor above, Misha Ivanov walked with a measured, heavy stride. He was flanked by two men who looked like boulders in suits. Misha hated malls. They were too open, too many lines of sight, too many screaming children. But the jeweler he used for laundering certain assets was traditional. He insisted on face-to-face handovers. Misha adjusted his overcoat, feeling the familiar weight of the Sig Sauer tucked into his holster. He looked down over the glass railing at the atrium below. His eyes caught a flash of movement, a man in a leather jacket, moving with a strange, rhythmic grace through the crowd. That one has military training, Misha's subconscious whispered. He didn't know it was Melvin. He only saw a back, a set of broad shoulders, and a way of walking that didn't match the frantic energy of the shoppers. "Boss," Yuri whispered, his voice suddenly sharp. "South balcony. 3 o'clock. Misha didn't turn his head. He used the reflection in a storefront window. Two men in janitorial uniforms were pulling submachine guns from a trash bin. "Rival faction," Misha muttered, his heart rate barely spiking. "They're desperate." Melvin heard the first shot before anyone else screamed. The crack pop of a suppressed weapon echoed off the marble floors. He didn't freeze. His military conditioning took over like a physical reflex. He scanned the area in less than a second: cover, exits, casualties. "Down! Get down!" Melvin roared, his voice dropping into a commanding baritone that sliced through the sudden panic. He lunged for a young shop girl who was standing paralyzed near a glass display. He tackled her behind a thick concrete pillar just as a spray of bullets shattered a nearby fountain. One shooter on the balcony, one near the elevators, Melvin calculated, his lungs burning. Suddenly, a heavy, rhythmic return of fire boomed from above. Misha was leaning over the railing, his face a mask of cold, lethal concentration as he picked off the assassins with surgical precision. Melvin looked up, squinting through the dust and falling glass. He saw the man, the dark hair, the sharp, Slavic features, the absolute calm amidst the chaos. So that's what a professional looks like, Melvin thought, impressed despite the danger. Melvin moved to transition to a better vantage point, his eyes locked on a third gunman emerging from a clothing store. "Watch out!" Melvin yelled toward the balcony, pointing. The gunman fired wildly. Misha ducked, but a stray round ricocheted off a metal sculpture and tore through the air toward the atrium floor. Melvin felt a white-hot iron brand sear through his left shoulder. "Damn it," he hissed, the force of the impact spinning him around. He hit the floor hard, his vision blurring at the edges. He pressed his hand to his shoulder, warm, slick blood began to seep through his fingers. Misha saw the man go down, the one who had warned him. "Clear the floor." Misha commanded his men. He vaulted over the railing, dropping down to the lower level with a grace that belied his size. He moved toward the fallen stranger, his gun still raised. He reached the man in the leather jacket. The stranger was pale, jaw clenched in pain, but he wasn't sobbing. He was looking at Misha with a dazed, defiant spark in his eyes. You missed the dinner," Melvin wheezed, the shock finally making his brain filter the truth. He recognized the face from the files his father had tried to force him to read. Misha froze. He reached into the man's jacket, pulling out a leather wallet to check for ID. He flipped it open. Melvin Sycamore. Misha looked at the blood on his own hands, then back at the man he had called delicate. This man hadn't hidden. He had saved a bystander and warned Misha of a flank. Yuri! Get the car to the service entrance. Misha shouted, his voice uncharacteristically frantic. He scooped Melvin up into his arms, ignoring the blood staining his expensive wool coat. You're Melvin? Misha asked, his voice low, sounding almost betrayed by his own assumptions. Melvin let out a weak, pained chuckle, his head falling against Misha's chest. And you're late, Misha. Very, very late. As Misha ran toward the exit, holding the man he was supposed to marry, he realized two things: the Sycamores were liars, and his life had just become infinitely more complicated. Chapter 3: The Recovery Pact. The smell of antiseptic and expensive cigar smoke was the first thing to hit Melvin's senses. It was a jarring combination, the sterile scent of a clinic clashing with the heavy, masculine musk of a gentleman's study. Melvin opened his eyes, squinting against the dim, warm amber lighting. He wasn't in a hospital. The ceiling was adorned with intricate crown molding, and the bed beneath him was covered in silk sheets that cost more than his first car. His left shoulder was numb, encased in a heavy bandage, but the throbbing heat beneath the gauze told him he was lucky the bullet had been a through and through. You have a habit of staying awake when most men would be unconscious, a deep, gravelly voice vibrated through the room. Melvin turned his head slowly. Misha Ivanov was sitting in a high-backed leather chair near the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had traded his blood-stained overcoat for a black silk shirt, the top buttons undone, revealing the edge of a sprawling tattoo on his collarbone. I've had worse hangovers, Melvin lied, his voice a dry rasp. He pushed himself up against the pillows, his military training screaming at him to assess his surroundings. Where am I? And where is the fragile boy my father promised you? Misha leaned forward, the light catching the sharp angles of his face. His gray eyes were intense, searching Melvin's face with a curiosity that bordered on hunger. You are in my home. And as for the boy, I suspect he never existed. Your father failed to mention you were 10th Mountain Division. He failed to mention you have the eyes of a man who has killed to stay alive. Melvin tightened his jaw. My family likes to pretend the last 6 years of my life were a rebellious phase I'd eventually grow out of. They wanted a socialite. I gave them a soldier. I suppose that's why they're so keen on selling me to you. I'm a defective product. Misha stood up, his presence filling the room. He walked to the edge of the bed, looking down at Melvin. There was an 8-year gap between them, but in this moment, it felt like more, a gap of experience, of shadows, of weight. I am 36, Melvin, Misha said softly. In my world, that is old. I have no time for games, and I certainly have no time for a husband I have to protect from my own shadow. I skipped that dinner because I thought you were a burden. And I skipped it because I thought you were a dinosaur with a god complex, Melvin shot back, his eyes flashing. A slow, genuine smirk pulled at Misha's lips. It wasn't the cruel smile of a mob boss, it was the look of a man who had finally found something worth his time. A dinosaur. Bold. Perhaps accurate. Misha set his glass down on the nightstand. The families are ecstatic. They think the shooting was a bonding experience. My men saw me carry you out of that mall like a trophy. If we cancel this now, it looks like weakness. To my rivals, and to your father's creditors. Melvin looked at his bandaged shoulder, then back at Misha. He hated the idea of being a pawn, but for the first time, the man holding the piece didn't look like he wanted to break it. A pact, then, Melvin said, his voice steadier now. We marry. We give them the alliance they want. But we live separate lives. You stay in your world of shadows, and I run my consultancy. No touching, no hovering, and no fragile treatment. I'm a roommate with a legal contract. Nothing more. Misha reached out, his large, calloused hand hovering near Melvin's cheek before he pulled it back, a flicker of something, regret. Respect, crossing his features. A cold marriage, Misha agreed. I will provide the security and the status. You provide the silence the families require. You will have the East Wing. I will not cross the threshold without your permission. Melvin nodded, though a strange, traitorous part of his mind noted how warm the room felt when Misha was close. Deal. Misha turned to leave, but paused at the door. One thing, Melvin. What? The way you took that corner in the mall, your footwork was sloppy. If you're going to be an Ivanov by name, we'll have to fix that. I don't like my roommates getting shot twice. Before Melvin could throw a pillow at his head, Misha was gone, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind him. Melvin sank back into the silk pillows, his heart racing, not from the wound, but from the realization that his cold marriage was already feeling dangerously hot. Chapter 4, Underestimating the Sycamore. The cold marriage had lasted exactly 3 weeks before the silence in the Ivanov estate was broken. Life in the East Wing was quiet. True to his word, Misha remained a ghost, though a generous one. He sent high-end espresso machines, tactical journals, and the best medical supplies for Melvin's healing shoulder. They saw each other at dinner, stiff, formal affairs where they traded dry observations about politics or the weather, the 8-year age gap feeling like a canyon they were both too stubborn to bridge. He treats me like a guest he's afraid to break, Melvin thought, pacing his room. He was dressed in a simple black t-shirt and cargo pants, his shoulder finally back to 90% mobility. He has no idea that I'm dying of boredom. That boredom ended at 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. Misha was away in Moscow for an emergency council meeting. The estate was guarded by a skeleton crew of the B team, younger soldiers Misha had left behind to maintain appearances. Melvin was awake, cleaning his custom Glock 17, when the house's internal silent alarm vibrated against his bedside table. He didn't panic. He felt a surge of adrenaline that felt more like a homecoming than a threat. Melvin moved to the monitor in his room, tapping into the encrypted feed. He saw them, 6 shadows moving through the garden, bypass tools in hand. They weren't rivals, they were dressed in the Ivanov tactical gear. A coup, Melvin realized, his blood turning to ice. They're not here to rob the place. They're here to take the fragile husband hostage to leverage Misha. He grabbed his headset, bypass coding into the security frequency. Security lead, this is Melvin Sycamore. You have 6 bogies in the North Garden, internal sector 4. They're using your own codes. Switch to channel blue now. Mr. Sycamore, the young guard, Victor, stammered over the comms. You should be in the safe room. I'll be in the safe room when I'm dead, Victor. Now listen to me, Melvin's voice was like a whip. They think I'm a socialite. They're heading for the East Wing. I'm going to draw them into the gallery. You take your team and flank the terrace. We're going to pincer them. Melvin moved through the darkened hallways like a predator. He didn't turn on the lights. He knew the layout of this house better than the guards did, he had spent 3 weeks mapping it out of sheer habit. He reached the grand gallery, a room filled with Misha's collection of Renaissance art and Russian icons. He overturned a heavy oak table, creating a fatal funnel at the entrance. The doors burst open. Check the bedroom, a traitorous guard barked. Grab the boy in. Pop pop. 2 rounds, center mass. Melvin didn't miss. The intruders scrambled for cover, stunned that the pretty boy was firing back with professional grouping. Melvin stayed low, his breath steady. 4 left. You're making a mistake. Melvin shouted, his voice echoing off the marble. Misha will peel the skin from your bones for this. Put the guns down and I might tell him it was my idea to spare you. Shut up, kid, one of the men yelled, lobbing a flashbang. Melvin closed his eyes and opened his mouth, shielding his eardrums. The world turned white for a second, but he didn't falter. He rolled to his left, firing blind toward the muzzle flashes. He heard a grunt of pain. By the time the smoke cleared, the terrace doors smashed open. Victor and his team swarmed in, the pincer move Melvin had orchestrated working perfectly. Within minutes, the remaining traitors were zip-tied on the floor. An hour later, the front doors of the estate flew open with such violence they nearly hit the walls. Misha Ivanov stormed in, still in his heavy winter coat, his face a mask of such terrifying rage that even his loyal guards backed away. He had flown back on a private jet the second he heard the alarm. He expected to find a crime scene. He expected to find his husband traumatized, or worse. Instead, he found Melvin sitting on the edge of a priceless marble fountain in the foyer, calmly field-stripping a captured rifle. Melvin had a smudge of soot on his cheek and a small cut on his hand, but he looked exhilarated. "You're back early," Melvin said, not looking up. "I saved you some paperwork. 3 in the infirmary, 2 in the morgue, and 1 who's ready to talk about who paid them." Misha stopped dead. He looked at the chaos, then at the small, bloodied rag in Melvin's hand. The dinosaur felt a prehistoric jolt in his chest, not of anger, but of overwhelming, terrifying attraction. Misha walked over, looming over Melvin. He didn't yell. He reached out, his thumb catching the soot on Melvin's cheek and smearing it away. His hand was trembling, just a fraction. "I told you to stay in your wing," Misha whispered, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. "And I told you I wasn't fragile," Melvin replied, finally looking up. The defiance in his blue eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet challenge. "I'm part of this now, Misha. Stop trying to protect me from a world I already live in." Misha didn't pull his hand away. He let his fingers linger on Melvin's jaw. "You are a very dangerous man, Melvin Sycamore." "I know," Melvin smiled, leaning almost imperceptibly into the touch. "That's why we're a good match, isn't it?" Chapter 5, The Vulnerability of Kings. The Russian winter had arrived in the city, coating the Ivanov estate in a layer of deceptive, sparkling white. To the outside world, tonight was the grand debut of the Sycamore-Ivanov Union, a high-stakes winter gala designed to signal stability to the underworld. Inside the master suite, Melvin adjusted the cuffs of a midnight blue velvet blazer. He looked at himself in the mirror and hardly recognized the man staring back. The military rigidity was still there in his posture, but there was something else, a gloss of power that came from standing at the center of the Ivanov hurricane. 8 years, Melvin thought, watching a snowflake melt against the windowpane. Misha has been doing this since he was my age. No wonder he looks at the world like it's a chessboard he's already lost. A knock at the door preceded Misha. The older man entered, looking devastating in a traditional black tuxedo. The sharp lines of the suit emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the daunting physical presence that usually kept people at a 3-foot radius. "The cars are ready," Misha said. He paused, his gaze raking over Melvin with an intensity that made the air in the room feel heavy. "You look regal, Melvin. It suits you better than the leather jacket." "Don't get used to it," Melvin quipped, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "I still prefer a holster to a pocket square." The gala was a sea of predators in silk. Every handshake was a probe, every smile was a threat. As they moved through the ballroom, Melvin felt the weight of the trophy husband gaze from the older dons. They saw a 28-year-old socialite. They didn't see the man who had neutralized a coup 2 weeks prior. But as the night wore on, Melvin noticed something he hadn't seen before. During a lull in the music, he spotted Misha standing on the balcony, away from the sycophants. The Iron King was slumped slightly, his head bowed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The moonlight caught the silver at his temples, a reminder of the 8-year gap that Misha often used as a shield. Melvin stepped out into the cold air. "The dinosaur looks tired." Misha didn't startle. He just sighed, a plume of white breath escaping his lips. I am 36, Melvin. Tonight, I feel 60. Everyone in that room wants a piece of me, or a piece of the man they think I am. I have spent a decade being a statue. It is exhausting to never crack. Melvin walked closer, breaching the cold marriage distance they had established. He didn't see a mob boss, he saw a man who had been lonely long before they met. You don't have to be a statue with me, Melvin said softly. He reached out, his hand tentatively finding Misha's. Misha's skin was cold, but his grip was immediate and desperate, his large fingers curling around Melvin's with a strength that spoke of a drowning man finding a lifeline. I thought I was too old for this, Misha confessed, his voice dropping to a vulnerable vibration. To find a partner who doesn't fear me. I thought I would just buy a life and live it until someone shot me. Then you showed up. A gift from your father that turned out to be a wildfire. The orchestra inside began a slow, sweeping waltz. Melvin stepped into Misha's space, placing a hand on the older man's shoulder. Dance with me, Misha. Not for the dons. For us. They moved together on the balcony, hidden by the shadows of the stone pillars. Misha led with a practiced, old-world elegance, his hand firm on Melvin's waist. The age gap didn't feel like a canyon anymore, it felt like a foundation. Misha provided the gravity, the wisdom of a man who had survived the storm. Melvin provided the spark, the reminder that there was a world worth living in outside of duty. Moya dusha, Misha whispered against Melvin's ear, the Russian words for my soul vibrating through Melvin's entire body. I don't want a roommate anymore. Melvin leaned his forehead against Misha's, closing his eyes. The cold air bit at them, but the heat between them was undeniable. Good, Melvin breathed. Because I'm a terrible roommate. I'm much better as a husband. In that moment, the cold marriage thawed completely, leaving behind something far more dangerous and beautiful than a business deal. Chapter 6, True North. The aftermath of the gala felt like the quiet after a storm, but for Melvin, the real battle was only just beginning. The Sycamore patriarch, Arthur, had seen the way Misha looked at Melvin on that balcony. He had seen the shift in power. Fearing he was losing his leverage over the Ivanov empire, Arthur called for an emergency family summit at a neutral downtown hotel. You don't have to go, Misha said that morning. He was sitting at the breakfast table, the morning sun glinting off the gold band that now felt less like a shackle and more like a promise. I can have the meeting cancelled. I can have the Sycamores removed from the city by noon. Melvin smiled, sipping his coffee. And let them think you're holding me hostage? No. I need to end this myself. The hotel suite was a den of forced opulence. Arthur Sycamore sat behind a wide mahogany desk, flanked by Melvin's two older brothers. They looked at Melvin as he entered, not with relief, but with the calculating eyes of merchants checking their inventory. Melvin, thank God, Arthur said, his voice dripping with false paternal warmth. We've secured a way out. We've made a deal with a private security firm out of the States. We're going to nullify the marriage contract on the grounds of coercion and the mall shooting. You can come home. We'll tell the world the Ivanovs forced your hand. Melvin stood in the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back in a relaxed military parade rest. Come home to what, father? To being the delicate son you use as a bargaining chip? Don't be dramatic, his brother sneered. Misha Ivanov is a butcher. He's 8 years your senior and has enough blood on his hands to drown us all. You're a Sycamore. You don't belong in a Russian cage. Melvin took a slow step forward. The air in the room shifted. He wasn't the boy who had scaled trellises to escape dinners anymore. He was the man who had held a fatal funnel in a dark gallery. I spent years in the military because I wanted to be away from your deals, Melvin said, his voice a low, dangerous calm. I thought Misha was the monster. But in the 3 months I've been with him, he has shown me more respect, more honesty, and more protection than this family has in 28 years. He's a criminal, Melvin. Arthur barked, slamming his hand on the desk. He's my husband, Melvin countered. And if you try to save me again, I will personally oversee the audit of the Sycamore shipping manifests. I know exactly where the business ends and the fraud begins. Misha didn't teach me that, the army did. The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time, Arthur Sycamore looked at his youngest son and felt a genuine, cold prickle of fear. Melvin walked out of the hotel and into the biting winter air. A black SUV was idling at the curb. The door opened before he reached it. Misha was inside. He didn't ask how it went. He simply looked at Melvin's face and saw the clarity there. He reached out, pulling Melvin into the warm, leather-scented interior of the car. "You're staying," Misha stated, though it wasn't a question. "I'm staying," Melvin confirmed. He leaned over, capturing Misha's lips in a kiss that tasted of freedom and salt. "But things are going to change, Misha. I'm not just a husband. I'm going to restructure your security protocols. Your inner circle is sloppy, and your logistics need a tactical overhaul." Misha threw his head back and laughed, a loud, booming sound that filled the car. He pulled Melvin closer, tucking Melvin's head under his chin. "A husband, a tactician, and a thorn in my side," Misha whispered, kissing the top of Melvin's hair. "I think 36 is going to be my favorite year yet." As the SUV pulled away from the curb, leaving the Sycamore Empire in the rearview mirror, Melvin realized that the arranged marriage hadn't just given Misha a partner. It had given Melvin a home where he didn't have to hide his scars or his strength. The underworld was dangerous, and the future was uncertain, but as Melvin felt Misha's hand settle firmly over his own, he knew one thing for sure: they were no longer playing a game of convenience. They were building a kingdom.